Hello, this is part 3 of quantum mechanics, and in this video we're going to be going over the various different interpretations of quantum mechanics that have arisen over the last century since its introduction into scientific discourse. To overview what we've learned so far in this series about quantum mechanics, the fundamental stuff of reality is not matter, energy, information, or even strings, but telesis, a substrate which represents and instantiates 5 interpenetrating utility functions, that of the primary, secondary, and tertiary syntactors, which is how reality is quantized intrinsically, and the primary and secondary tellers, which determine reality's intrinsic utility for its structure and evolution. That which is displayed, T, the terminal domain, is not where the structure and dynamics of the universe reside at all. T is just the terminal domain, the material world is just the display of a self-simulation with all this deep structure, which is determined in the terminal domain of the terminal domain of syntactors, and the non-terminal domain, the spirit world of tellers. So our and reality's true essence resides in this non-terminal domain, in the spirit world, the conspansive dual of the physical world, which then allows reality to exist and evolve according to the utility of its primary and secondary telic quanta. God and human beings, respectively, are what is determining the structure and teleology, the intrinsic ends and purposes, the striving towards various goals and utility functions, as well as the series of directed aims which seek to fulfill that end, are the true teleodynamics of reality. What makes reality interesting is happening because of God and human beings. The seen world, like in Plato's cave, is a shadow of these telic identification operators, and yet the form and the instantiation, so the form is the mental patterns, the cognitive perceptual syntax happening at these various levels of utility, and the instantiation, which is what is actually being displayed, the various relations and objects in the material world, are self-dual to one another. There's no ultimate distinction between the two. The seen world is This is why reality doesn't split into two different identities, the seen world and the unseen world. So we established, therefore, on this basis, 6 rules for our interpretation of quantum mechanics. Number 1, humans are important. Number 2, causation is telic. 3, one universe must be selected out of many possibilities. 4, everything is enfolded unto everything. 5, quantum mechanics must scale. 6, to be is to be perceived. Let's compare. The Copenhagen interpretation is perhaps the most famous interpretation of quantum mechanics. This was actually this is sort of the orthodox view of things, because this was authored by Niels Bohr and Werner Heisenberg, who were the scientists who were actually, creating and interpolating the various quantum mechanical results in all the way back to the 1920s. So the Copenhagen interpretation, which essentially says there is no deep reality. When we're observing something, we're not observing reality itself, but reality as exposed to our method of questioning. And so this is how it explains, for instance, the double slit interference pattern. And so the Copenhagen interpretation agrees with two of the 3 principles. Number 1, quantum mechanics must scale, and number 6, to be is to be perceived. So number 5, but it disagrees with that humans are important, causation is telic, one universe must be selected out of many possibilities, and everything is enfolded unto everything. So with respect to perception, the Copenhagen interpretation holds that the act of registration is what actually collapses the wave function, and so this means that being is in some fundamental sense related to perception. Tangible reality is given rise to by this wave function collapse. And the correspondence principle, which was coined by Niels Bohr, shows that in order for quantum mechanics to make any sense, to be a valid theory of science, it must scale to reproduce classical physics at when you take the equations for large amounts of quantum particles. And So it does very well in these two respects, but the problems variously are that it does not give any special status to humans or agent level utilities except for quantum wave function collapse, that this doesn't actually have to do intrinsically with the structure and evolution of the universe. It does not hold, and so it doesn't hold any teleology. There's no intrinsic ends or purpose because there is no deep reality, and it instead holds that causation is probabilistic, with the quantum wave function representing a space of possible eigenvalues from which one is selected essentially randomly for a quantum particle to emerge. It defies the kind of metaverse idea where you have the space of potential by using this model of the quantum wave function collapse as a probabilistic eigenvector space. And it really only holds one universe. There's no potentialization and actualization duality, and no assertion of the extended superposition or implicate order whereby everything is enfolded onto everything and you have this deep reality. So really, the Copenhagen interpretation is essentially a theory of S sigma, of the surface structure of reality, but doesn't penetrate into its deep layers. So seeing as it denies deep reality, it has good core structure, and it's actually the basis. Basically, every other quantum mechanical theory is reacting against that. And it's very good. It has good core structure, and it's very impressive for the time, but it falls short in several important respects. So this gets a 2 out of 6. The Observer Created Reality by John Wheeler. So John Wheeler actually agrees with all 6. Humans are important. Causation is telic. One universe must be selected out of many possibilities. Everything is enfolded onto everything. Quantum mechanics must scale, and to be and is to be perceived. The participatory universe is basically the CTMU interpretation of quantum mechanics, with the detail fleshed out by Chris Langan. If you read Chris Langan's 2002 paper, The CTMU, A New Kind of Reality Theory, it's actually about 15 pages of it is directly responding to Wheeler and his criteria for building out a theory of reality according to his 2 papers, Beyond the Black Hole and Information Physics and the Quantum, The Search for Links. And so the participatory universe says that essentially what gives rise to the structure of the universe, and what he says is physics gives rise to observer participancy, so this is humans participating in the quantum wave function collapse, and the telic utility identified with itself, and which then gives rise to the universe. So that observer participation, whereby we're giving structure to the universe through our observation, and thereby, in a limited sense, creating it. So physics gives rise to observer participation. Observer participation gives rise to information, so there's this quantum information. That information is how reality identifies itself and allows for its self-organization. And then information gives rise to physics, so it's a closed loop. Physics gives rise to observer participation gives rise to information gives rise to physics. And so this means that in terms of the physical laws and structure of the universe, the fundamental, there is this deep structure, and what this deep structure is aiming towards, it actually has a teleology, is essentially the emergence of biological life and consciousness. That if you think about the history of the universe, you have in the early stages, right after the Big Bang, a very hot and dense state, and then it expands and cools, and then eventually it gives rise to this great, people think that there's entropy, but actually in some sense it's happening in the opposite, because the reality isn't getting less chaotic, because we have now galaxies and star systems and biological life, and this is towards a purpose, that reality needs to become aware of itself and identify with its own structure through self-perception and self-perceptual entities at the secondary level of utility, which then parameterize the evolution of the universe. It gives rise to itself retroactively. There's actually this future to past, really interesting causal dynamic. And this is the So it agrees on all things because humans are very important to the structure and evolution of reality. Causation, what is actually caused, what is actually instantiated in reality, is not the result of this surface structure, but it's the result of this deep structure of these interlocking utility functions of all these observer participants over time, including into the future. So reality is configuring itself according to what is most utile to the greatest amount of observer participants over all of time, and everything that everyone that is, was, or ever will be. And one universe is selected out of many possibilities according to this teleology. Everything is enfolded into everything in this deep structure. Quantum mechanics scales to actually represent and instantiate and communicate and express the meaning and teleology of the observer participants who are determining its quantum wave function collapse. And to be is to be perceived, because perception is what is actually creating this, is what is actually instantiating reality. It's the fundamental quanta of reality, in a sense, is perception and self-perception in the observer created reality by John Wheeler. So this actually does very well on all counts. So this gets a 6 out of 6. Consciousness-dependent reality. This was jointly developed by von Neumann, Wigner, and Stapp. So this agrees with numbers 1, 2, 3, and 6. Humans are important. Causation is telic. One universe must be selected out of many possibilities, and to be is to be perceived, but it disagrees with 4 and 5, that everything is enfolded unto everything, and that quantum mechanics must scale. So this theory of quantum mechanics essentially maps itself into 4 processes, and so stat process 0 is, being with free will, is how does the quantum wave function collapse? How does this act of registration actually create a tangible reality from this space of potential? And this is the question which every quantum mechanics interpretation is trying or avoiding the answer to. And so stat process 0, a being with free will freely makes a choice, and this is the preparation stage. Stat process 1, there's the quantum particle creates a finite expansive potential, a triggering from which a certain eigenvalue can be expressed. Stat process 2, collapse. This is the choice of the quantum wave function. Why does it select a given state to become a quantum particle? And then registrations, you have this closed feedback loop whereby that is recognized by the being with free will, which then collapses the wave function and gives structure and utility to this particular quantum particle. And so the CTMU maps the 4 processes into the conspansive manifold easily. Firstly, you have, being with, I just said this basically, but the problem with this is, even though it can explain the structure of things, it's the von Neumann-Wigner-Stapp interpretation never showed wholeness. It only shows how things happen at a very microscopic level. It doesn't scale. It doesn't accord with the correspondence principle of Niels Bohr. And so the scope of consciousness-dependent reality is less than other theories. It's only trying to explain quantum mechanics, which is respectable, but it's incomplete if we want a true quantum ontology. So as a context-specific interpretation, it's unrivaled, especially for its time. And interestingly, the 4 stat processes map somewhat well to Aristotle's 4 types of causation. There's the material cause, which is the substrate. You have then the formal cause, which is the metaphysical pattern being instantiated. You have the efficient cause, which is who is causing something. There is a personal being who's made the free will. This maps to stat process 0. And you have the final cause, which is the act of registration, and the actual teleology, the actual end and purpose towards which something is being actualized. So that's another, if you're interested, you should explore that. I haven't fleshed that idea out totally. So next we have, that gets a 4 out of 6. Number 4, Bohmian mechanics. This was authored by David Bohm early on, and this was later revised into the implicate order theory of quantum mechanics, also by David Bohm. So the Bohmian theory of quantum mechanics essentially says that there actually is no quantum wave function, and there isn't this potentialization, the quantum particles are actually just like regular particles, essentially, and there's a pilot field which it's literally a pilot because it's what's determining the direction and instantiation of quantum particles. So there's this pilot field which guides quantum particles, which are, again, really just ordinary objects, and therefore the universe and so this guides it from its potentialization to its instantiation. It's like a ballet, you can think of it. And so the evolution at the quantum level and at the global level is actually entirely determined, with humans explicitly and intentionally removed from the mechanics of quantum objects. So this is the point of Bohmian mechanics, is to say we don't need this human level of utility, we don't need any teleology. So this actually formulated against explicitly many of the rules for our interpretation of quantum mechanics. And so quantum mechanics, and it explains quantum mechanics poorly by denying the wave-particle duality, by denying these corresponding phases of inner expansion and then requantization, thus essentially denying the existence and evolution of reality. It's all deterministic and arbitrary. And this is something we've talked about on this channel before, that this is very, very dangerous. That the implicate order is somewhat implied by this theory, so you can say that it does scale, so it meets at least one of our principles. But that was only fully articulated by Bohm much later in his life. It doesn't really deal with the macroscopic scales. It does to some extent, because it's saying everything is deterministic and arbitrary, but it also denies the role of registration in the behavior of quantum particles. So it's not on our list, but also another fault of the Bohmian interpretation of quantum mechanics, Bohmian mechanics. It's important to note that it posits the absolute dualism between particles and their trajectories, and so expectedly doesn't allow for points and their fields to exist as one identity. The field has to be intrinsic to the point just as much as the points are contained within the field. The direction and the instantiation must be self-dual to one another. They have to exist as one identity, as required by triality. So the Bohmian mechanics comes up short in several important respects, so actually only gets 1.5 out of 6. The implicate order, David Bohm, this was formulated much later in David Bohm's life. And this one agrees with principles 2, 4, 5, and 6. So this is causation is telic. Everything is unfolded unto everything. Quantum mechanics must scale. To be is to be perceived. And it disagrees with 1 and 3. Humans are important, and one universe must be selected out of many possibilities. So implicate order is a lot better because it allows for both deep, which is the implicate order, and surface, which is the explicate order level structure of reality, and thus resembles the CTMU in several respects. It shows that quantum mechanics scales. This is the focus of the presentation, by having this, orderly harmony which underlies all of reality. It allows for everything to be unfolded onto everything. This turn of phrase was actually coined by Bohm to describe the implicate order, and allows for generative teleology to give rise to an undivided wholeness. Although it does not take into account a cosmic wave function or potentialization in a multiverse. So Bohm's presentation, if you read it, it's actually super unclear on a number of points. So this is why I struggle to say that the implicate order is correct, because I don't think Bohm clearly explained it enough. But it can be interpreted in other ways. It's rather murky, actually. But the CTMU provides it with logical structure and separates the wheat from the chaff, and it's actually quite profound. So this one, it has actually 4 out of 6. So this is very good. So lastly, we have the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, which was made by Hugh Everett. This is when you hear about the multiverse. This is what people are talking about. And this one, it really doesn't agree with any of our principles, because it's designed explicitly to ignore the principles. It denies the existence of the quantum wave function collapse. It denies any real causation, because it says that the universe is splitting off into different trajectories at every little quantum event. So the only one it kind of agrees with is that one universe must be selected out of many possibilities, but then it actually says that all of those different possibilities, everything that wasn't selected, has equal reality to the universe in which we live in. And so and it disagrees with that humans are important, that causation is telic, that everything is unfolded onto everything, because there's no deep structure. It's literally just random splitting off at every little event. And it disagrees that quantum mechanics must scale, and that to be is to be perceived. So many worlds is, again, explicitly formulated to overcome anthropocentrism, to deny quantum wave function collapse, which is an obvious feature of our universe unless you have all this ridiculous stuff that Everett added in. It's a cop-out, essentially, of explaining causality by saying that it's basically splitting into different universes at every little quantum event, and so you have an infinite number of universes, nothing to identify or distinguish between them, and this is what my physics teacher talks about. It's basically Ant-Man bullshit. The fact that you see this in like the Marvel movies, it's just so bad. It's so illogical, you know. Oh, well, in an alternate universe, such and such happened. You know, my girlfriend never left me, etc. Like it's absolutely fucking stupid. I won't mince words. It essentially denies human existence, not in the metaphysical sense. Obviously, it still says humans exist. It's explicitly to deny God, to support materialism, to not explain teleology or why. It's like, why do we always live in a universe with cause and effect, with standard laws and structure that's fine-tuned for human life, in an environment whereby the reciprocal feedback between environment and organism, it produces, you know, teleological order. Why does our universe always work? Why does our universe have this structure, which seems to be better explained by teleology? Oh, well, actually, there are infinite universes, and in 99.999% of them, this doesn't work. It's like, then why do we live in that one? What are the odds? And it just doesn't make sense at all. Because there should be, even if you say that the universe has been, you know, fine-tuned because we happen to live in a universe which allows for the existence of life, why then 1 second later is there not a million other universes which totally decohere? It doesn't make any sense. There's no structure, there's no evolution. And the fact that this is taken seriously is a testament to the absolute stupidity of academic science. That said, all that out of the way, that was kind of a rant, but it is absolute. The many worlds interpretation is actually absolutely seminal by positing the existence of a multiverse, which is generalized to a metaverse by Langen, from which one universe is selected. So essentially, this is how you can have this potentialization phases. Reality as a whole has this inner expansion whereby it expands to include all potentiality, but then it has to actually decide on one particular universe in order to have this quantum information to make sense of this observer participation. So this is what we talked about with John Wheeler. So despite getting this core structure right, it fails once more because it affirms the equal existence of every possible universe and thus denies the wave function collapse entirely. So this one gets 0.5 points. And for the record, the CTMU actually is somewhat formulated as an extension of the many worlds theory because it shows how true and good order, using its unique logical structure and philosophical syntax, it shows how true and good order is extracted out according to the secondary utility of its tellers, and thus actually gets Everett 5.5 more points. So it's kind of sad because he had a little bit right and then everything else was wrong. So after I get back from camp in August, we will start to work on the problem of quantum gravity, which is bringing the subordinate forces, the electromagnetism and the strong and weak nuclear forces, into coincidence with gravity. And the way we can do this, we need a unified theory of quantum mechanics and quantum field theory, whereby quantum particles are explained as essentially excitations of a conspansive manifold, which is somewhat like a quantum field, but just as the particles are contained within the field, the field is contained within this particle. So we have this self-dual structure with this expansive manifold, this metamathematical structure, which describes how reality exists and evolves over time at all levels, and it can do this both at the subordinate level of quantization and quantum mechanics, and it can do this at this general level of general relativity, of the global structure of reality, and it can bring these two things into coincidence. And this is how we can unite those three forces with gravity, which is explained not in terms of quantum relations, but in terms of the geometry and distribution of matter in the universe. And so this can actually be done quite easily in the CTMU, and I think I know how to, but I'm going to wait until Chris Langan publishes. I think he's going to publish a paper on this, if I'm not mistaken. He's alluded to this in the past, on quantum gravity and how we can have a unified field theory. So just a little hint, if you can read between the CTMU, the lines in the metaformal system, it actually is the theory of quantum gravity. So taking this video and our video on the metaformal system, if you watch both of these and really try to grasp what I'm saying in each of them, you should be able to essentially construct a DIY try it at home unified field theory, and this is what science and academic science in particular has been striving towards for the last 100 years. And so this is very important. This is very exciting stuff. I'm super pumped. I'm amped, but we won't get to that yet. Let the light shine forth in the dark. Yet. Let the light shine forth in the darkness. May the peace of our Father in heaven be upon you. Like and subscribe. Peace.